Hey, Guobnescia here. Eva is finally here, and not only was she already one of my favorite characters, but her kit is one of my favorites too. She is very powerful, maybe the strongest right now, very satisfying, and very cute. Today I'm going to go through her kit and how it works because it's a really weird one, and then show off her Eidolons and how good that E1 is, as well as show you my calculations on her best light cones and builds. After that, it's teams. Like and sub if this video helps you out at all, share to anyone that might need help, and let's begin. So Eva's base stats first are pretty interesting. She's paper thin like a hunt character, has high attack despite not really caring for it like a normal carry, but at least her speed is decent. She then also has the highest energy cap in the game by far, but her actual cost is only 240 and her unique kit mechanics make it so she's spamming out ults a ton regardless. Anyways, when leveling up her abilities, first you want to level up her talent, but her relation skill is very important too. After that, level up her ult into skill even if it's a minimal gain, and basics can be completely ignored. Now onto the kit showcase. She is an Elation unit all about spamming ults, so first let's check out how we get those ultimates. In her talent, we can first see that she scales on crit damage, converting 20% of hers to Elation. That doesn't mean we forego crit rate though. Anyways, for ultimate generation, we can then see that when Eva gains energy, she will gain an equal amount of certified banger, and when she gains certified banger, she will gain an equal amount of energy. No, this doesn't then work with each other again, as that would create an infinite loop and the end of the universe. But what this means is any sources of certified banger are equal sources of energy for her. If Yao Guang ults with her 20 punchline aha instant, Eva gains 20 banger, and that is thus 20 energy, not including other parts of the instant like Eva's own elation skill and stuff like her traces giving more. And this energy scales with energy regenerate. As you can see in this Elation MC example, Eva gains 10 certified banger but not 10 energy, she in fact gains about 12, gaining an energy rope's worth of extra value. If you don't understand why EMC is giving bangers, that's up soon. Anyways, it works vice versa with energy. If Huohuo ults, we get 96 energy, which is 96 certified bangers for Evanescia. And with energy regen affecting energy, this in turn affects bangers. So if she skills for 30 energy with an energy rope, well, we get 35 to 36 certified banger. This means Eva will have by far the most amount of bangers among all Elation units. Now that isn't actually that crazy because the punchline / banger multiplier is one of the few actual diminishing returns multipliers in the game, but it's still great for Eva's damage. So certified bangers are the goal here. Getting as much of that as possible is how we generate Eva ultimates. So how do we get more bangers? Her first way in her own kit is her skill giving 10 punchline when used. That is 10 punchline extra in the next aha instant, which when combined with future bonus abilities is actually a decent amount of banger generation. Anyways, an ally like EMC can generate them, and aha instants will generate them when ending, but Eva has two traces, her A2 and A6, to further banger max. Yes, that's a word. Her A2 offers a permanent 30% crit rate that will not show up pre-combat as well as a buff to her ultimates. Very strong by the way, but what we care about here is the second part, where when an ally that has a lower participant ID than Eva gains certified banger, well she will instead convert 50% of it to her own amount. But this is properly yoinking bangers. If my EMC is using their skill and normally gaining 20 bangers, too bad, because Eva will convert half of it to her own, and now EMC only gets 10, but Eva also now gets 10. But it doesn't end there. Her A6 also converts teammates' certified banger when it ends too, and this time they don't need to have a lower participant ID than her, it works for anyone. She only converts 50% of it, but turning what would normally be just disappearing resources into her own is a really cool mechanic. And before you talk about Yao Guang A6 breaking this, it's very negligible. So aha instance, certified banger generation, energy in general, we use it all to get to her ultimate. At 240 energy, we can cast it, but at 240 energy, we also get another effect. When accumulating energy, she builds up this charge on her UI, and when you have accumulated 240, she will clear this charge and Master Fox will launch a follow-up attack and regenerate 10 energy for her. This means every ult is actually a little cheaper than advertised. By the way, this Fox will also apply a 12% vulnerability onto enemies when it attacks, thanks to Evanescia's A4. But the real deal is that ult. It will attack all enemies and then perform 5 bounces to random targets. If you remember from before, we get more bounces thanks to her A2, but the lower the enemy count, the more bounces we get, which helps her power in single target despite her overall damage distribution being stronger in AoE. This has quite a high attack percent multiplier, but even though she is an Elation carry, about 10% of her damage in a Yao EMC team will actually come from her attack scalings, which is neat. But as I just said, she is an Elation carry, so how do we do Elation damage? Well, her Certified Banger passive applies an Elation damage multiplier onto her skill, ultimate, and even Master Fox. We love Master Fox. Her skill now deals 16% Elation multipliers to all enemies hit for up to a 48% Elation multiplier. Her ultimate now deals Elation damage on the AoE and bounce parts. This can be a 24 to 120% Elation multiplier on the first part of the attack, as well as a 168 to 252% Elation multiplier on the bounces. Very strong. Also do note that it will take a minimum of 480 Certified Banger for its calculation, which means even if we don't get to seriously high numbers like 1000, it won't even matter that much. Going from 480 to 1000 Certified Banger is only a 1.16 times DPS increase. Certified Banger will still matter, of course, for the rest of her abilities, as they won't take this minimum amount. And finally, Master Fox gets a simple 25% Elation scaling on every target he hits, for a possible total 125% multiplier in full AoE. As we can see, Evanescia is strongest into 5 targets, unlike the pure bounce DPS that is Silverwolf 999, though she still does great into single target thanks to her ult scaling its bounces on target count. And finally, Evanescia's Elation skill, of course, which is a simple but again AoE Elation attack. It also generates an additional 5 Certified Banger, so more energy. So her gameplay loop is generating Certified Bangers through ally and AHA actions, generating that ult, and then ulting at appropriate times. You might want to save ults for specific mechanics, for enemies to spawn for a different wave. You ideally want to ult before you cap out on 480 energy, or else you'll lose some energy from Master Fox acting, but other priorities can come first, and overcapping won't be that bad until E1. Ideally, her Elation skill, Master Fox, and her normal skill can deal with AoE enemies, and then you can let her ult sink its maximum bounces into the main enemy. Because of the gigantic multipliers of that Elation skill, as well as the frequency in which it can occur with Yao and EMC, it actually deals 30% of her damage profile in a 3-target fight compared to the ult's 40 to 45%. However, in a permanent 5 targets, the Elation skill is very similar, and in permanent single target, the ult comes out way ahead. As for her non-Elation damage, it makes up about 10% of her damage profile, so it's pretty negligible. Anyways, it's Eidolon time, and starting with one of the best E1s in the game. Now, Aglaia E1 was crazy at release and is still amazing now, but it was partly because it fixed easier uptime issues and those were factored into calcs. Evanescia E1, however, doesn't fix any mechanics since she doesn't have any glaring issues, it's just a pure beast Eidolon to an already amazing character. Also, we get a Labubu. 20% respen is a nice first boost to damage, but then when Master Fox uses an attack, Evanescia will trigger an extra Elation skill. This is a ton of free damage, but also a bunch more Certified Banger and energy throughout a fight, which is thus more energy and more Certified Banger. But then her Elation skills now also generate an extra 10 bangers for 15 total. So every AHA instant, every Yao ult, every EMC ult on Eva, every 240 energy, we are getting 15 Certified Banger Elation skills, which is thus generating even more energy for even more Elation skills. It's like a loop. This is the absolute first upgrade to your Eva team after getting Yao E0S0. It's like Hycelians or Aglaia E1 where they just put an OP E2-esque Eidolon in the E1 instead. But E2 is also a banger. The crit damage buff is okay, nothing too fancy, but then her A2 and A6 Certified Banger conversions get upgraded. It's worded weirdly, but it basically means that if EMC skills for 20 bangers, it splits into 10 and 10, and Evanescia gets 15 instead of 10, whilst EMC still gets 10. So it's like she gets 75% of the actual Certified Banger amount when allies gain Certified Banger. The A6 normally converts 50% of lost bangers from allies, and this upgrades it to 100%. So if EMC loses 20 bangers on their turn, we get 20. It's not a Silverwolf E2, I mean we have an OP E1 already, but it's pretty good and will get better with future Elation allies. How much better is unknown, so you can wait to pull this. E4 is then just some def ignore, not bad for an E4 though, and finally E6. We get a Certified Banger duration increase, which is there I guess, but more importantly, we get a scaling Merry Make bonus to all Elation damage. Merry Make is Elation's special extra multiplier on top of everything else, so this ranges from a 1.15 to 1.35 times undiluted increase to all her Elation damage. But then on top of that, we get a Saber flashback with free returned energy on ultimates, resetting every 4 ultimates. I still don't like going for E6s, but it's another great E6 like always. So here are my Eidolon sims for Evanescia. Not really many notes, just remember it's a 3-target sim, and E1 can do a little bit better into AoE like PF, and also feels amazing in practice because you get so many more instances of damage, and it lets you focus ults even better into single target. E2 is also likely going to get better, especially with an Elation sustain, but by how much, I don't know. But now it's on to builds, starting with Relics and Planars. There's no cool Divinus shenanigans this time, guys. Evanescia is a slower paced Elation DPS and can only currently run the Magical Gale set for damage. Funnily enough, despite being able to spam out ults out the wazoo, Eagle's effectiveness is kind of dampened on Evanescia since more actions doesn't really do that much, and too many actions can hurt Certified Banger uptime. The main reason though is that most of her generation is from allies and AHA rather than her own little skills. If it does result in an extra ult, it's obviously good, but I don't recommend this set. And for planers, you'll just run Punk Lord. Sorry, no build diversity. Izumo is an okay alternative for the crit rate, but will be a few % weaker. At least the main stats are a little interesting though. We have crit damage chest, any boots with a priority on attack or speed for damage, any orb with a priority on physical damage or attack for damage, and HP or death for defensiveness, and then energy rope. But let's go into more detail. For guaranteed main stats, we have crit damage chest and energy rope. For the chest, it's simple. With crit rate, you're very likely to overcap or guaranteed to overcap in some cases, and so we take crit damage. For the rope, energy scales everything for her. You get more ults and more bangers. Attack percent buffs a tiny portion of her damage and ignores the rest of her kit. Get an energy rope. And then the orbs and boots are up to preference. The orb first is quite simple. Damage percent is strongest for damage, attack percent second, but they're both so close it doesn't matter, pick whichever of the two. However, because an offensive orb on an Elation carry does so little to the actual damage, and she doesn't scale on attack percent like Sparksy does, you are able to opt for any main stat. So if you aren't picking offensive ones, then you can prioritize HP or death for more survivability, and this can be especially nice for sustainless. It's up to you though to see if you need it. Now for the boots. Some people love speed boots, some people love non-speed, I'll explain both. Most of our old generation is from ally turns, AHA, energy gifting allies, we know this by now. It's kinda like how the Herta and the Acheron have their big nukes batteried by others. This means running a lower speed doesn't hurt us that much. In MOC, for example, it's unlikely you're taking more than the first cycle for wave 1, and you can easily clear before a second Evanescia action, so 134 could do nothing. Then on wave 2, you could act a second time because the wave is harder, but if your second action doesn't generate an ult, then it was useless. Lower speed also has other benefits, like letting you hold onto Certified Banger for longer, but in reality this isn't that crazy since for the 50th time, the multiplier is pretty diminishing. But it does let you hold onto other buffs for longer, like Elation MC's 20 to 30% Elation technique, which is a very substantial buff. Or if you run Sacerdos on them, a slower Eva lets them permanently stack the 36% crit damage on her. Now at the same time, attack percent boots doesn't improve her damage that much, it's more other benefits that make going slower nice. So attack boots aren't that crazy either because she's an Elation carry. Also, more actions in a longer fight could be useful, and again, the 134 speed breakpoint hitting 2 actions on wave 2 cycle 0 could make or break an ultimate. Same with Anomaly. If it doesn't, the boots can be attack. If it does, the boots should definitely be speed, but that's super dependent on the fight. Speed also affects AHA even if it's only a tiny amount, as she will be the 3rd fastest Elation unit, but those small amounts could change where AHA acts in very niche cases. So it's really up to you and your subsets and builds and preference. I've given you the info, there is no best, and it's very variable. And in the same vein as the orb, you can run HP or defense boots over attack if you need more survivability for a sustainless run, and go damage or attack on the orb instead. It all depends on your substats. For a stat goal, we have a 100% crit rate in combat. Remember, the 30% in her A2 does not appear pre-combat. Then you can aim for 200 to 240% crit damage pre-combat. It can even be lower if you're using Mushy, and that's okay. Speed can be base or 134. We talked about the differences between the two earlier. And an attack goal does not matter. Anyways, now onto Lycones. Let's check out their signature. We'll first get a cheeky 60% crit damage and a 10% energy regen rate stat line. Then we get scaling energy regen rate dependent on our max energy, which for simplicity's sake is just an extra 10.8% energy for 20.8% total. And finally, Elation skills apply a 15% vulnerability. It's great for damage, it's great for team damage, and it's a whole ton of energy, which is more ults and more certified banger. E1 still takes absolute priority over this, but this can be a second upgrade. You go E1 S0 into E1 S1 or E2 S0. S1 is cheaper and similar in power until more Elation units come out, but at the same time S1 can also scale on more Elation units thanks to its energy regen. In my calculations, I have it at 19% higher than Mushy, and this is considering team damage for Mushy even if it's not that much. If you don't manage to get the extra ult over other light cones, which would be surprising but is possible in faster clears, then its value drops slightly. For other cones, if you accidentally pulled a Sparksy cone dupe, that's okay to use. Battle Pass S5 is also great, but requires heavy crit damage subset rolls over crit rate. And Tomorrow Together is one of the worst cones I've seen in the game. Anyways, it's time to end with teams. Just like with Silverwolf 999 and Sparksy, the first pull you should do for your Evanescia, at least right now, is getting your Yao Guang. The extra AHA instants every ult not only generate energy and certified banger, and vice versa from Evanescia Elation skills, but AHA instants also generate certified banger for the whole team when they finalize. So at E0 Yao and E0 Eva, we're getting 20 banger on an AHA instant ending, plus an additional 10 per Elation unit. That's 40 per Yao Guang ult in a normal team on top of her Elation skill. Oh, and of course AHA instants are activating Elation skills, which for Eva in 3 to 5 targets is a whole ton of damage. And then Yao Guang buffs her up a ton with fantastic uptime, and finally, Eva is activating her great boons so frequently with her skills, ult spam, Master Fox's Elation skill spam. Your third slot is then EMC. Them generating bangers every skill batteries up Evanescia slowly but surely. Then them gifting bangers on ults as well as free Elation skills is even more battering, as well as a bunch of additional damage. The crit damage is also giving her a minor double buff thanks to the crit damage conversion. Their buffing overall is not that bad since we are now in a hyper carry scenario. They can run Eagle for more turns and more ults and more Elation skills, but a slow Eva can also abuse Sacerdos on EMC if you'd like as well, for a possible 36% extra crit damage once ramped up. Now there are technically other options. I would not pull these characters for Evanescia, but first off, Sparksy can work as an EMC replacement if you also have Yao Guang. She gives buffs just like them even if weaker, and would substitute the lack of buffing with her own personal damage. Her certified bangers will be dismal, but Elation skills are her biggest source of damage, so it's not that bad. I don't really like Sparksy since you don't really have the SP gen to use her effectively. She doesn't act that fast compared to EMC to actually generate certified bangers forever. She also doesn't have as much of a ceiling compared to EMC, and you probably want E0S1. If you pulled E0S1 Sparksy and want a place to use her, go ahead, but I would not pull Sparksy for Evanescia, as an E0S0 Sparksy is weak in this spot and would get decimated by the value of E1 Evanescia in her place. Eva will likely get an actual third slot premium upgrade in the future made for her. And the other option is the other Sparksy, Sparkle. All of her buffs work for Evanescia, even the attack is okay for her, and she can offer more turns, so potentially an extra ult in some scenarios. Losing certified banger from acting too much, however, can suck even if it won't as much for specifically her ult, and so again, I'd just rather you stick to EMC. Some other universal buffers can work here too. And since people will ask, don't use Sunday. He is just a worse version of Sparkle here, who is already a weaker third slot than EMC. We get weaker buffs than her, and we get even more certified banger draining. Sunday's ult and doubling of turns is technically nice for energy, but we're losing out on more than we're gaining. Anyways, for the fourth slot, Huohuo wins again, and her energy can properly buff the whole team rather than just 2 out of 3 like in Silverwolf 999 teams. And with an energy cap of 480, 96 energy is extremely juicy from a sustain. The energy forever is really good, but enabling consistent Yao Guang ults as well as more frequent EMC ults is amazing for a unit just here to help us live. I just wonder how OP the Elation sustain will be. If running Sustainless, remember about those potential survivability-based main stats on Eva, and then pick your poison of Universal Amper. E4 Welt is naturally the best right now thanks to its combination of powerful amplification and survivability benefits. E1 Tribi is excellent for pure amp and redistributing all of those AoE abilities, and Dance on her can be used to give a base speed Evanescia an equivalent amount of actions as a 134 one. Now if you're feeling really cheeky, Cyrene is a really fun and strong 4th slot. Non-Chrysos heirs lose the special flair from Cyrene, but when you're aiming to clear as fast as possible, that doesn't really matter when you're looking at 3 max ultimates for your whole team. Wave 1 of MOC is easily clearable without any Cyrene input, letting you Cyrene ult Wave 2 for 2 Evanescia ultimates, a Yao Guang ult which is another Evanescia Elation skill, an EMC ult which is another one, And this all is a ton of ult gen, which could be another Evanescia ultimate, and so another Master Fox. You get the point. At E1 Eva, it goes crazy. And it's not just ultimates, since Evanescia scales her bangers based on energy, you're also looking at hundreds of immediate bangers. Anyways, that's all on Eva for today. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and sub and share to anyone else that might need it. Thank you so much for watching, thanks to my PogChamp YouTube members, and have a Guoba day.